On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, we have the one and only Jolly Corley, but we're shaking things up a little bit with the topic with Jolly. We are talking about how Camp Robindel incorporated and integrated their kitchen staff and really all of their support staff into their dining experience. And what they did was some culinary changes and really brought it all back to culture and community. We think that this topic is going to have some great takeaways for overnight and day camps about how they can do the same and be inspired by what Jolly did with Robindel. We hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hello, everyone. I'm Howie Grossinger. I am the co-owner of Camp Robindel, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, as well as a co-owner of Camp Walden, an overnight camp about 3 hours north of Toronto.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Schuna, co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp located in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. Hello, Howie.
Hey, Kelly. How you doing?
I am great. How are you?
We're good. Good here. Excited for another show. Nice to see you. And we have a wonderful guest today. And before we get into that, we have to take care of some business. And that is to thank one of our two sponsors, and that is CampBrain. Every interaction with your parents matters. That's why CampBrain made an elegant, easy-to-use parent experience. Make it simple for parents to register multiple children, fill out all the necessary forms and paperwork as well. Just another reason to love your software. CampBrain's been doing it since 1994, a staff of 45 plus dedicated people to help you with your every need. CampBrain does provide all of their clients a comprehensive and flexible registration system that can handle all of your day, overnight, family, alumni, holiday, and one-off camping events. I consider myself an OG user of CampBrain, so very proud and so thrilled that they continue to be a sponsor of our show. I encourage you, and Kelly as well, to check them out. Your partnership really does get stronger with CampBrain after implementation, and they have great customer service. Check them out at campbrain.com or call them at 866-485-8885.
Awesome. Thank you, Howie. Thank you, CampBrain. So Howie, I don't know about you, but I love to follow other camp social media. I think we all do, just to see the exciting things that people are doing, new ideas. And if you've been following Camp Robindel, like I have on social media over the past year, something that I've loved is, number one, they're just, they're new directors, or they were the directors, but they really have taken the helm of Robindel in the past year and a half, I think about it is. But they've been doing projects and they've just been sharing. And something I've really noticed that I love is they are involving their off-season staff in like meals together. And they're just creating this culture of like togetherness and one large group versus like the directors separate from maintenance or kitchen. And then I noticed this summer that they really had their kitchen staff involved more in camp and on the social media, and they were highlighting a lot of their food. So I was really curious just to know about like the motivation for this and what they've learned in the process, and what other camp owners and directors might take from that. So I don't know if our listeners know, well, they should know the like amazing Jolly Corley. She has been a guest on our show before, but if they don't, I would like to welcome Jolly. And Jolly, can you tell us a little bit more about your entrance into the camp world and what you're doing now and where you're at for our listeners?
Yes, thank you, Kelly, for that very generous introduction. And hello, Howie. And I'm so glad you're following our social media. We've been having so much fun with it over the last year. And my foray into camping, I I always hope that it's like a lot of other people, is that we all like the Parent Trap. And so then we were like, how do we get to do camp like that? Um, so I say that tongue in cheek, but actually kind of may be true. And so as a college student, I was home visiting my mom, who was worked at Purdue University, and she said, there's a whole bunch of camps in the union, like looking for staff. And I said, this is my chance to go to the Parent Trap camp, but as a counselor out east. So I only looked at the camps out east because that's where I imagined. I don't know if they actually ever said that, but in my head, that's where it was, in New England. And I found the owner at the time, Nat Greenfield, was hanging out looking for staff. And to be really honest, I thought I would do it that one summer. It was great. And again, maybe like a lot of camp people, it's all of a sudden you just like keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. Howie is like nodding and laughing right now.
Totally,
And
totally.
the next thing you know, you're like, oh, it's been 20 something years and I'm here. So in 2001, though, I did come on full time. I didn't just like kind of keep hanging on to the coattails here, but I did go on, come on as their staff coordinator, which a lot of people know, where I developed the staff leadership training. And then recently, as Kelly mentioned, I came in with my partner, Corey Daniels, who's the business partner, and the Rashes, who are the family that helped us buy this. So we have this little buyer owner operator group that we're part of. And the four of us have since exactly, do I know the exact date? December 29th, 2021. We have taken over, as you said, the reins or the helm of Camp Robindel, and we're having a lot of fun, a lot of challenges, and we have been really transparent about the process not for the most part, as you saw on our social media. We're just sharing it all and having fun with it. So thank you both for having me.
Well, it's great to have you back, and it's interesting. We're on a bit of a trend here with talking about new ownership groups, and particularly during the pandemic, which is a conversation, of course, we could, have at length, perhaps at another time, maybe at a conference. But I do know that the challenges of the last few years have created so many opportunities for everyone to look at what I think my wife Sari has called like the silver linings of the pandemic, and how a lot of us have either been rethinking or reshaping not only our internal operations, but also the way we project what we do to the outside world. Camp has never been more in vogue in many ways. The pandemic, in some kind of warped, sad, happy way, has promoted the value of camp, and we get to celebrate as camp owners all the benefits of camp in ways I don't think we ever got to do before. And I know the work that you're doing at Robindel is so cool. And I think the focus for today's conversation is your integration of sort of this holistic view of our whole team, not just segmented stuff. And I know in particular, we want to talk a little bit about the impetus for you to integrate, kitchen staff into the whole camp experience and things of that kind. And I really find this to be a very unique topic that many of us as camp owners may be doing to various degrees. But as with most things, Jolly, that you do, you always get us thinking and motivated to try new things. And this is, why we have you to discuss this. So talk to us a little bit about that. We're so curious, and would love to start the conversation with that.
Yeah. So I love that the industry as a whole is moving towards this, as you mentioned, Howie, like with all the support staff really trying to integrate them more and more and more. And actually, maybe the lines are blurring a little bit. But I will say this started for me a long, long time ago in wanting to move in this direction. And until I, as my business partner Corey will say, now you can, until you take the reins. Sometimes you can't do some of this. And but we had an experience years ago, probably 12 to 15 years ago, where a young woman named Alice, I'll just use that, we got a call from a previous staff member who said, my friend's daughter is at another camp in the kitchen. She is devastated. She's really sad. They're not allowed to come out of the kitchen when they're working into the dining hall when the kids are there. They live on a separate, like across the road. She's just really feeling isolated and sad. And it wasn't the experience that she was wanting. And it was a little bit, my friend, they both were in, this young woman is from the UK. So my friend is calling me from the UK, just panicking. And she had worked at Robindel. She was like, I just know that it could be different there. And we did take her, the organization that worked with her, we brought her over and just hearing her story. Now it's only her side of the story, but just hearing that and having heard that before, that there, I think especially then, there was just very much like, here's the support staff and here are the counselors. And I just ever since then thought, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? And so this was in the back of my mind. So that experience, and then just as you know, when you meet so many of these sports, they're like nuclear engineers or musicians, like they're doing this for this summer experience. And they're these amazing university students who are taking advantage of J1 visa, cultural experience, these opportunities. And you're just like, the community as a whole, meaning our kids and the counselors, don't even know really who these people are. So we had started doing more things. And when I got the reins, and last year we could really do it, I was making sure, I thought, this is what I want to do. And that's the first experience. The second thing is, this kind of is the whole culinary, is that my husband's a European historian. He did a sabbatical in France. And my kids, when they went to elementary school, we just found that the culture around eating was so different than the States, where it's like, just like get in, eat your food really quick and get out, right? And like my husband's very first meeting with his advisor in France, it was a lunch. So he had everything ready. And after they ordered at the restaurant, he brought out everything and she just looked at him. I was like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I brought the things we were going to say. She said, not until after lunch. Like, yeah, what are you doing? But there was this whole culture of that where there was a 2-hour break for lunch for my kids. So some kids whose parents weren't at home, I happened to be at home, so they would come home and eat. But the kids actually had an hour with a whole group, another group of teachers who came in. So the teachers who taught the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s left, went on their lunch, and another group came in. They sat at, my kids would pass the dining, and they were like, Mommy, there are like real plates in the dining, like compared to the elementary school back at home, which is everything's like throw it away or whatever. They're like, it's like sitting down, like to them, it looked like Thanksgiving at our house. Like that's how fancy it was. I'm pretty sure it just had, but they did say it has like tablecloths and it had this. And I remember talking to the director about it, and they said, well, that's part of their education, is learning about the food they're going to eat, learning how to sit together to create conversation, to create this community. And that like stuck in my brain, because I think part of what camp does is we're creating community. And we brought a lot of those home back with us when we came back. So we ate all of our meals together all the way through high school. I would have friends who would say to me, like, with your kids' activities, how do you eat together? And I said, well, one, we eat later. So the kids would have a snack just like that we would do in Europe. And we all 4 of us got to always eat all of our meals together. And I saw how that created, just within our family, such a culture. And so it was one of the number one things I wanted to bring, was bringing all of us together to eat and to slow everything down. And so that was like, those were like the impetus of what I wanted to do with camp, is right? We're camp people, we build community. What better way than 3 times a day, all of us coming together. And I was kind of piggybacking off of something that the previous owner, Nat Greenfield, had done. And he had always had the leadership team all eat together. It was a little separated, I changed that piece, but I loved what he was doing, is 3 times a day, we all checked in with each other. And we had this kind of a meeting at the meals. Although I guess if we were meeting with my husband's advisor, she would disagree that you don't work at the meal, but I like the concept of that.
That is so, I love that, Jolly. And I love, well, number one, I wish all elementary schools in the US had that, where they sat down and really valued that time together versus shove it in, eat with your jacket on so you can get out to the playground as quick as possible. That was me as a kid. My mom was like, Kelly, why is there food on your winter jacket? What's happening here? I was like, I gotta get out and play. But I love that. And I love that stuck with you. So when you kind of did that, was that this past summer, you decided to make those changes. So will you talk a little bit then about the initial changes you made to that meal and with that kitchen staff?
Yes. So all of that, there were quite a few things. So in my brain, it wasn't just about the camp counselors and the kids all eating together. We'd already been doing that, slowing that down. It was like, how do we bring everyone else? And the other thing, like I mentioned before, is having the kids know who prepared their food. Like, this food did not just appear, and where did the food come from? So that was something that I was wanting to like do. So I said, you know what, we're just going to have one seating. It's also a lot for the kitchen staff to cook 2 meals per, like 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch, 2 dinners. So I thought, well, maybe by bringing all of them together, they'd have less like preparation. Now we'll talk later about some of the issues with that, and you know, the takeaways from that. But that was my initial thought, that we could all eat together. We have something called bunk aunts and uncles for those staff who don't live. We're an all girls camp too, so our male staff then are paired with a cabin and become the bunk uncle, and any female staff that don't live with them become bunk aunts. So then I included all of our support staff in that. And I'd already been doing it a little bit with our maintenance. And so I knew it could work. Our housekeeping were already part of that. So I just pushed it a little bit further with our kitchen staff. And the other interesting thing that it did, and this kind of gets into other stuff, is it made us have to think about when the meal times are, right? So the other thing about having meals is it used to be they would eat before. So support staff would eat before, which meant one, they had to get up earlier. So our breakfasts are at 8:30. We go a little later. So our breakfasts are 8:30. They'd be eating at like, you know, whatever it was, 7:30, and they would have like 15 minutes to eat. And it was against what I was trying to say, right? Like, of like slowing down, not just shoving food in. And I would find so many of our staff would come from other countries that was really hard for them to get used to. And then there would be this like conflict between the management of the kitchen and stuff, like, you guys have to hurry up, you have to, and it just set a tone that I wasn't like thrilled about. So getting all of that, but then I also wanted the kids to hear. So this was another aspect of that learning that my kids didn't necessarily have, but the kids who stayed at school learned, is like, today we're having, you know, macaroni and cheese, and the cheeses that are in it are these cheeses. They taste kind of like this. This is why we did it this way. You know, cheddar cheese does this, or whatever, mozzarella does this. And then we're having carrots, and today they're raw, and we're having a dip, and then whatever the dip is made out of. And there was just like this description. And part of the reason when I was talking to the director is that she wanted the kids to be able to taste foods prepared different ways. So pasta is going to be prepared with a red sauce another time, and you're going to see the difference. It's the same kind of thing, but maybe it's different. Carrots next time are roasted, and that changes the taste of food and the flavor. And so the thing that you don't like, when you taste it another way prepared differently, you may like, you may not. But at least now you'll know. So I wanted the kitchen staff, one of the ways for the kids to get to know them and to know how the food was prepared and where the food came from, was to introduce it. So our chef would come out, which Kelly, we a lot of times would video these, because he became just this great figure. And he would have different staff members come out, especially if they had been the one to create or have the idea. So other staff member might come out and introduce food as well. But he would come out and say, today, this is what we're having and how it's prepared. Now, I'll say that this has actually became a practical thing. So everyone who knows the last couple of years and distribution and trying to get food, right? We used to have the menu set up. And the chef and I, Travis, were like, you know what? If you come out before every meal anyway, like, we don't actually have to have a menu. And then that way, when they're not chicken fingers because they didn't get delivered, nobody's angry, because people get very upset when you don't have the meal that's on that sheet of paper, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you both are like, yes, that is happening.
That's right.
And so there was this practical thing that actually came out of that. We were laughing so hard because so often whatever we thought we might be having was not going to happen, but the kids did not know. And so this just helped in that whole slowing everything down, because at the very beginning we'd wait, and they would wait. And I didn't know. I'll be really honest. I have ideas all the time, as Kelly knows, and they don't always work. And I was like, maybe we'll just try this for a little bit. And I was really honest with the kitchen staff. And again, we'll talk about some of those takeaways, like, hey, I want this to work for you. It shouldn't be more work for you. That would be awful. If my idea makes more work for you and more like just an awful situation, we can switch it up. But interestingly enough, I'm kind of getting into the takeaways. I am not kidding you. Parents, as I've been talking to them this fall or visiting, said one of the number one things that kids wrote about was the food. And not just that, but the announcement of the food and what it was going to be. And even they even tried things that they would never try. I had one mom tell me that her daughter Chloe wrote home about the oatmeal all the time. All we did was set up an oatmeal bar. Like there's oatmeal that you could go get with all the different things. So she was like, great. So this mom made oatmeal at home. She's like, no, mom, that's a camp thing. So she does not eat oatmeal at home, apparently, but at camp, that's a camp thing. And that was really great for me to hear, because really I want them to experience other, new foods and try things that maybe they wouldn't normally try. But yeah, just that whole bringing all of the staff in to announce things, but then also to find out what they're good at. So for example, one of our staff members we found out was a musician. Like he's actually a conductor of like a band at home in Mexico. And so for 4th of July, we just said, hey, are you interested in being part of a band? He stole the show. He's a percussionist. We happened to have a drum kit. I am not kidding you. Like he stole, he was amazing. But then what that did was like the kids were aware, and the other like counselors were like, okay, Chris is not just a person who cooks and is in our kitchen. He's like a talented musician, and it just connects them. And so we're constantly looking for things that they could do. We had a couple of staff members who are really good at soccer, and they could be soccer judges, and they could help out, or refs, not judges, sorry, refs, by sports. And so we could start to pull some of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Whether it was purposeful or not, but watching that transition from the off season of, creating this culture of meals together, and like everyone took different turns, and like you were highlighting, you're like, what did you make for us? And everyone sat down together. And then it was fun because I was like, oh, there's the chef from the cook, chef, from the off season that used to eat with Jolly and the other staff members. And now he's like a figure also continuing in the social media. He's part of camp. And so I love that you set the tone in the off season, and people watching and could see that. And then it continued through the summer. And I also felt like those staff members were recognized for not just the work that they were doing around camp, but just as a part of this team. It just felt like this family. It felt like a family to me, that then the family was continuing to be present during the summer. So I love that. And I like the announcement, and I don't know, hats off to you. I think that it was very apparent, and it was neat to watch, but it was intentional. So I think that's what I noticed about that.
Well, I can totally relate to those examples too, Jolly, because we have found both at our day camp and overnight camp the incredible benefits of that, what has traditionally not been the integration of support staff into the entire camp culture. And for us, and I'm sure for you, having done it now, it just becomes a natural. But for camps who are working towards this, I can definitely advocate for it. Just changes everything about your entire community when your campers, who, depending on your clientele, come from privileged backgrounds, their parents can afford to send them to your camp and provide them this wonderful gift of camp. And they get to, through camp, have a greater appreciation of the people who make their food at day camp, for the person who drives them to camp on the bus, so I can relate to what has been very intentional for us to give out bus driver of the session awards, or have the bus drivers around the camp stage at day camp doing the camp dance with us, and having those relationships, because your bus driver is a member of the staff. Even though I contract them from a separate company, they're part of what we do. And I think that if that can extend to the school bus run, where they have a greater appreciation and respect for their school bus driver, we've done an incredible service without necessarily labeling it in a most overt way. But they just, these things through osmosis and through repetition, I believe, are some of the educational benefits of camp for sure. And on the kitchen side, I know for us, a member of our year-round leadership team, not a full-time staff member at Camp Walden, is Lindsay, who is, one of the leaders in the kitchen. So she's part of every meeting where we're strategizing about training, and she's a voice. Hey, can my kitchen staff be part of that session at staff training, not just learning how to put the pots and pans away or things of that kind. And I think that, we're onto something here if camps can do that. And I also just wanted to say the last thing, you talked about the musician. We have, like many overnight camps, a lot of international staff make up our kitchen staff team. We have like our own rock concert in the middle of the summer, and we have a dedicated set just for the kitchen staff who have their own band. And it's probably the most lively, excited moment of the rock concert, because all the staff get to see their staff they see through a kit that 3 times a day during meals, rock it out. And I think, I smile when I hear you talk about sort of this the benefits of this, because I endorse that 100%. We've seen it, and it's little steps and they just become so beneficial. So I'm just smiling from ear to ear because I think it's just so awesome, and I can totally relate to this.
Yeah, and some of the things you're bringing up, like training and having our kitchen staff eat with the kids, right? So they all became bunk aunts and uncles, and our bunk aunts and uncles always eat with their cabin. Having them do that was just such a difference, such a game changer in allowing this integration for them to really get to know them. Now, it was more successful for some than others, and again, we can get into that a little bit more, with the takeaways. But I decided they're really part of the team. Then they have to be at orientation, so they were at all the orientation pieces. So that made it more integrated, right? Like, so they weren't just like in the kitchen and then we happened to see them. They were actually there during all of the orientation pieces, which
and I also
think working with.
Exactly. And I also think it's when they're not on in the kitchen and they're out and about at camp too, when they go down to the waterfront and the kids see them, or they're having their moment, doing activities, which, we afford all of our staff to do at strategic times, like I'm sure many of us try to do. It just becomes not like, who are they? They're sitting over there kind of thing, but they're very much integrated, but more meaningfully connected with because of those efforts. So I think that, for the kitchen staff specifically, and I love the idea of the kitchen staff coming out during meal. Like, I just think that is so cool because, the kids typically, at the risk of a massive generalization, but there's probably some truth, there's just not a lot of appreciation of who makes our food and where it comes from. And I think these steps are vitally important when, food scarcity and global issues of all these things are so prevalent and relevant. Huge kudos to you for sure.
It's been exciting. I think the next step of this is to really get more local in our food right now. This last year, with all the issues just in general with getting food, we decided to focus on the people and their preparation of it. And then the goal is then to move. And so then the kids are really seeing even more locally, like where the food is coming from.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So as you think about, where do you take it from here? I'm curious about some of the things that, being a forward thinker, like I know you are, like what's next kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, so there's a few things, like I mentioned, takeaways. So there's
yes, please.
And then that kind of will, I think, feed into where we hope to head next. And one of the things that I think it's so important for us as leaders, that sometimes we, especially in camping, when there's so much to do, we get caught up in the weeds of doing things rather than presenting a vision and allowing the staff to then take it from us, right? So that was one of for me, the most important things is I love ideas. As I mentioned before, I'm always throwing out ideas. And so I had to be really clear, like, here's my vision, is that we're creating community and we're not isolating anyone, and we're integrating people in the sense they're part of this family. And so I would throw out ideas like, let's all eat together. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I had to say then also, to preface, I'm just throwing out ideas because I want you to know that all ideas are on the table. That we need to think outside what we're normal. And we also in camp, there's traditions, there's things that we don't even think are traditions. We come to like, but we've always done it that way. And we've, we're very good at that in the camping industry. Like we've always done something. And so I think it's really important for us to just present the vision that we have and the why. You knew I was going to get back to that. So the purpose, why we're doing something, and then allowing our team to really set that. So for example, it became very clear that it was tough for the kitchen staff to eat the meals with us, right? Like that is a hard thing when you have, for us, 350 people eating. That's like when you try as the person who has a dinner party to sit down and you just feel like you're constantly up and trying to, make sure everybody's getting what they need. So that was tougher than what we had expected. And so we changed some things, but we always made sure that there was a place at the table. So people could, and they kind of had these turns, like, okay, we have a crew that's on during the meal and a crew that's eating with, and it would just switch. Now we're still playing around with that and how we can make that work. But that was just an important thing that people knew on the team, that this is just an idea. We're just trying it. Like, it's okay for it to fail or for us to think like, oh, that worked really well. Let's move it even further. The return rate has always been really high in our support staff, just from lots of things, but now it's like out of this world, and being able to move people into some really cool things. So now we have Chris, who was such a great musician. So who's going to do a music program. We had the music program we had tried in like 2018. We had gotten it going. 2019, it was really building. And then of course, COVID hit and everything went kind of, and it was still just a little like seedling of a program that we had. So not strong enough to withstand a drought of COVID. So it just kind of fell by the wayside. But now having someone like him be able to come and who is a conductor and has a band and has all this knowledge of music was like, okay, well, now you can do even more with that. And so we're actually now looking at how can we have our kitchen staff actually do programming and that be part of their contract. So it's not fair on their off time to be like, and we expect you to do X, Y, and Z. And so another takeaway is to really make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into. If they've heard from friends what it's like to work on support staff, and then they come to my camp and it's like, whoa, this was not, then we're not, we may have an issue just because that's not what they were expecting. So it's being really clear, is this kind of what you're wanting? But also in the return, how excited those who are in culinary, like we actually hire people who are actually in culinary studies or, that really are enjoying culinary. And it's so exciting to allow them to come up with really cool things like, whether it's a meal or a dish. And so the other thing was, when I worked with Travis, is I really wanted the kitchen, because the rest of our team, as you both know, is very much, we're building staff, we're growing staff. It's very much an educational opportunity. Nobody's becoming professional camp counselors for the most part, right? So what are we doing to help them in their education through their role as camp counselors? And I wanted the same thing in the kitchen. So even if they're not going to become culinary, but those especially who want to, how are we helping them? And it's not just this mundane, like, oh, you're doing the dishes or you're doing this, but what part of that? So really setting up the kitchen like a professional kitchen. And then we just saw the food change too, right? To more of not just like a dining hall cafeteria experience, but actually a culinary experience. So that was really, really exciting. And I will say another takeaway, it was tougher for our returning staff to move towards this. So just an FYI, they've always done it this way, and how are we going to eat with them, and how are we going to do that, and how are, but probably one of the biggest supporters who began to really see once she could get out of the just the idea of like, but we've always done it. That was someone who'd been with us for a really long time. She's probably our biggest advocate for like, okay, now I know what other things we can do. And so that's been really exciting. So she actually does our baking with the kids, and we're doing a lot more integration. So every Friday when we bake challah, they're helping to bake the challah, and they get turns to do that. And we'd always kind of done that, but we'd only done a few kids. And so it was kind of like, if you didn't figure out how to get in there, so she was able to figure out how can we get the whole cabin to come and do it at once. So now every kid gets to do challah, where it used to be like, 22 kids the whole summer got to do it. So that was been really exciting.
I love challah. I need to bring that to our day camp. It's my favorite. It's just so good. My
Okay,
mouth.
I just love that you said that right now. The way you said it was amazing.
Because I said it. Did I say it wrong, Howie?
Yeah,
Give me an
challah, yeah,
education.
absolutely. You're on board. Way to go, Kel.
Thank you.
There's nothing like fresh challah.
It's the best. It's so good. So Jolly, you talked about some of your takeaways. What did you experience as far as the impact on your staff culture? Or, it sounds like families felt this. What was takeaways from staff? So it was hard for some and some change, but like what impact did you see on the culture of your staff, or comments from staff after the summer and those changes were made?
The integration of our staff was incredible. When you would watch a group go off for their night off, it was a whole different ballgame, right? Like it used to be, even when I think we were doing what I would have said was a pretty good job of integrating our support staff, it still was, here's that staff and here's the counselor staff. It just was like, that's how, whether it was, I could blame it on language, I could blame it on all these things before. Now I'm like, we were not pushing this far enough, because now when you would see them go out, they were all going together. I don't mean all, but the group that was leaving was just this wide mix of people who worked both like either in the kitchen. And like I said, we've been really moving with our maintenance and housekeeping, but the timing of those, and I'll tell you what we did with those just for anybody who's interested, we actually switched their day to match the counselor's day, right? That just made it, I was just like, why are we not doing that? We have counselors who are on duty at night, so we'll have support staff who are on duty. And we just switched the whole day. Like, you can't get into a cabin for an emergency thing, anyway, until they're all out of there, or they all have to leave anyway. So what does it matter what time they're starting? So we just switched their whole day, and it made it easier for them to eat their meals with us. So that was one of the things that had kind of helped with that. But watching relationships was really interesting. And then the other thing that I found really fascinating that I've seen come up is that we actually have staff. So one of our photographers who's American recommended her friend to work in the kitchen. She's American. Like we've never had that happen.
Where do you get that? That doesn't happen.
No. So that alone, and watching that switch and say like, this is a possibility that you might really enjoy, and then them enjoy and want to come back for another summer. That is like, to me, was like, what? And then just like, again, this is like I don't even know if I should say this, but I won't say their name. But then when you have like a counselor who's dating a kitchen person, that just never happened, right? Like because they didn't even have the opportunity.
I know, I could, yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, so they get to know each other. Again, that part of it was just, that is me like looking at that as a director going like, this is working. How well it's working, I don't know that I need it to work that well, but it's working. They feel very much a part of each other, and they're, you see them at our campfire. We have campfire every Sunday, and that was one of the things I said, everyone has to be at that campfire. Again, some of our returning staff are like, oh, we never had to be at campfire before. I'm like, but that's I'm not saying you have to be at all the evening activity. I'm saying campfire. I want everyone there, everyone at the campfire. Every Sunday. That's what I'm asking for. And here's why, right? Because we're a community, and that's our one time every week where we kind of come back together, we close out one week and we start the next. But then after a while, you see them dancing, or those who are not everyone wants to get up and dance. We do dancing at our campfires, but they're watching and they're laughing and they're enjoying being together. But those are the things. We are an all girls camp. So we had integrated, and I just really did this even further, all of our staff who don't live in cabins. So obviously our male staff don't. So we integrated because we were able to put everyone pretty much on the same schedule. When it used to be like support staff ate earlier or this, it was like they're waking up, and then the counselors who didn't have to get up are annoyed because, people are getting up and waking them up and they don't have to, whatever. But we were able, because of switching the schedule, now any staff who don't live with kids can now all live together, and that helped as well, both female staff and male staff, and that just made a difference. And that's like obviously for overnight camp.
Yeah, getting your support staff to your evening staff recs and opening that door to them to participate in the silly stuff, and and enjoy the snacks and the food that they probably helped prepare, and enjoy the meal with their fellow staff members, is a really powerful statement about, you're just not here to provide for us, you're here to enjoy it with us. And you see those relationships, and culturally, camp does take a real positive turn. I also, Jolly, I think one of the things that, as a camp director, a camp owner, it's often that we stand up in a group of call them our senior level staff, and we present a vision, and it's natural for them to say, well, because Howie threw it out there, we have to do it this way or that way. I was so encouraged by your emphasis on just, I'm throwing out an idea. Let's see where it lands. I'm going to put it in your hands. I want to support this, right? But sometimes I think, as directors and owners and senior leadership within our camps, and I think it's just natural to say, hey, the boss said they want this done, so we're going to do it. And sometimes feel uncomfortable being able to say, well, I think we can do this, but I think there's a barrier or a pitfall to this, and won't tell you. The more we can open it up, and when you said how you want to talk about why we think it's important, but there may be many ways to approach this, is not only applicable in this topic, in this thing, but virtually everything we do as we look to make each summer better than the next, or try to implement something where staff, if we're selling the camp experience to staff as a growth experience, or as I know you have, promoted as literally the best internship you could get, then we need to encourage them to see it as an opportunity to make change and be a participant in change. So I just, my takeaway from the conversation is really centered around that kind of messaging, because, you don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. You need to rely on them to provide what they're experiencing day to day to shape what it is you ultimately get to. So I just think
that gives
that's
it the ownership, right? That's also then, because you're exactly right. You set it down, and don't preface like, I'm just throwing this idea. There may be a way better way to do this. Let's hear your ideas. I want you to, I'm throwing ideas out like this, so you know what direction we can go. Like, here are the boundaries. Like, we could do it this way, we could do it that way. Throw them out. And then you who work in it, you who do the day-to-day, that also builds your culture. Because if they just go with what you said, then when it doesn't work, or it's annoying, it's more work, then it's Jolly's fault, Howie's fault, Kelly's, it's like, and this sucks. Am I allowed to say that? Sorry, this stinks. This is, bad.
You can say that.
So that is absolutely, and I think that is where being able to move the support staff is, it started with our culture, with our counselors. So there was already a trust there that we would allow for growth and ideas. I mean, like our snack, we introduced a new snack. I mean, talk about, we just like introduced a million trillion things. I had to like control myself, like, okay, we can't just change everything in one summer, but we introduced a snack, and that was a fun way for people to explore. Originally, I was like, you guys could have a different snack all the time. Well, that became like crazy, right? Like, so but it was them who decided. I said, you decide. They're like, well, which snack should we just do? So it's a little easier for us than every day thinking of this, another snack. I said, well, which ones do they like the most? Or what are the easiest, or what do you enjoy making? Because as someone who likes to cook myself, it's like, there's certain things I love, making, and there are other things where I'm like, ugh, it's not as fun, or it's more whatever. And so that's what they did. They basically said, well, when we serve these items, they're gone. The kids, we don't have tons of leftover, which also helps, like storage of food. So it is putting it in their hands. It really does. Then there's an ownership that they have in it, and a pride. Like, so with them sitting, you're talking about with the staff sitting, kitchen staff sitting with, at the tables eating. There's another part of that when you think about when you serve food, when your family's like, oh, this is so good, thank you so much. Now, granted, there are times in your own family are like, this is awful, Mom, I don't want to eat this. Hopefully they're not doing that. I did not hear any of that. We have tons of options, but there's also a pride there too, right? When you're hearing the people around you enjoying the food that they're eating and getting excited and cheering, but actually sitting with them, that is exciting. Like I said, that part, we'll have to set expectations a little bit easier or a little bit more to make that easier. Because for some people that was intimidating, right? To sit with all this, any of you who've ever eaten in a room with that many kids, that part can be really intimidating. So
Yeah.
Just making that a little bit, but the leadership team did a really good job of, who had been in their place a few years ago. That was one thing they did really well, was they did it too, right? And they enjoyed it and they had fun with it. So then that helped the new staff who were like, oh my gosh, like my English. But I also said, that's how you're going to learn it. You're not going to learn English speaking to your friend in the kitchen in the same language. So being around kids who just talk, that's another benefit for you as a staff member coming for this cultural experience. And what better cultural experience, again, right, than being with, it's like being with a host family. So you could go to another country, but when you're with a family who's from that country, much better. And I think sometimes in the kitchen, even if you have people from lots of different places, they're not usually from the United States. So now they may have a really great cultural experience if they're from the Ukraine or from, wherever of Mexico, because they met some people from Mexico, or they met wherever. And I'm like, well, that's not quite what we were looking for. So
Can you clarify for me too, Jolly, before we wrap up, are you continuing to have your leadership team eat together and kind of do your meetings, or are they interspersed? So everybody's interspersed, and how did you figure that out? Did they, do you have assigned spots? Or do you just let's split up and divide? Talk to me about that, just because I think that's something that's important.
yeah, we did decide not to have all of us there, because then it became like the head table. And there was just this, I'm trying to get rid of that hierarchy of, and it kind of maybe happened naturally again. So we're working on that. So Corey and I split up. Now Corey has her family there, young kids, whereas my kids are older. And so that, so she has her husband and 2 kids with her. So, and we have lots of families at camp. If anybody watches our videos, we have an entire day camp now. Because I'm not even joking, we literally have Robindel day camp for our staff members who have children. And so each of them, so we had the families eating together. Oh, that was another thing. It used to be families had to eat before. Oh, that drove me crazy. So if you worked for us and you had a family, you couldn't eat, basically. Whatever. Anyway, so now they all eat, but I wanted them to be able to eat together, and I wanted them to be all around. But it tended to be that they kind of all congregated to one section, which I actually understand, right? It may be easier that all the families are kind of together. We're going to play around with that a little bit. And so what happened was that we just put staff, when we first were saying here's where this cabin is, this is where this cabin, then I had staff all throughout. So there were tables that any staff could sit at, and not the unit leaders or the department head, it was just staff. So I sat at this one right in the middle, because it used to be the head table. I just wanted to be able to hear and see everything. Well, then of course, some unit leaders sat there, and then some other people, and then it just became, that's where we sat. So I'm still working that one out. That was something that didn't quite work out like I thought would do. But the fact that Corey was a little separated, it was interesting. So then there was another group of leadership team that kind of sat closer to where she was. So it separated that out, I think. And then the other thing is, to slow down the meal, is that usually we would do announcements right at the beginning. I know some people do them right at the end. We actually did them 15 minutes into so we were sitting down for about 15 minutes, and it slowed the meal down so that there were announcements, and then people would finish up eating. It just slowed we spend a lot more time in the dining hall, which was another thing that our returning kitchen staff had to get used to, because in and out is what they're used to, and then they get more time off. And I was like, we can give you more time off in different ways. Let's figure that out. So another takeaway, that if you have that, it could be a problem.
Awesome. So good, Jolly. Like you said, Howie, this is something we have not talked about, and so unique, but so applicable to all camps. So I love that you have shared this with us. Thank you so much, Jolly. So we are going to move on to our inspiration. But before we do that, we have to thank our second sponsor, Camptivities, Ryan Rosen. Scheduling and not making a mistake is just, gosh, it's a nightmare, and it's so hard. And as we get closer to camp, the capacity and our brain power, and it's what's your money worth? I think that's such a good, what is your time and your money worth? And that time well spent on other things could be time that you give to Camptivities to be able to do your scheduling and take that off of your plate. So that is, in our opinion, money well spent. So if you are interested in taking that scheduling off your plate, having a great software to be able to do that for you, minimize mistakes. We want you to check into Camptivities. So if you are interested, reach out to them, look them up, give their website a little gander at camptivities.com, and they can set up a chat with you and just tell you more. So check out Camptivities. Thank you for sponsoring us. We really appreciate it, Ryan. All right, time for inspiration, Howie.
Wait, I have a
Yes.
question because I'm super excited about Camptivities.
Yeah.
And I want to look it up. I was writing it down. Camptivities, like .com.
Yeah, .com.
Okay. Sorry,
Yes.
just to make sure.
Thank you. No,
Super excited.
Jolly. Thank you. Camptivities.com. Yes. Thank you, Jolly.
We not only have sponsors, but we have guests who are even interested in our sponsors. Like, that's pretty awesome. Thank you. We didn't even plan that. That's awesome, Jolly. Thank you. Ryan's going to be so happy with us. Inspiration. It's our tradition on the show to have ourselves and our guests share something that they'd like to share that's inspiring them right now. It could be a book, an article, a podcast, but you have to listen to our podcast before you listen to other podcasts. Let's be clear. A leadership quote, etc. I thought in good Kelly Schuna fashion, I will start because we're all role models, right, Kelly? We talk about that a lot. So for me, I've had a really great run of resources and quotes and things, but I find myself at the time of this podcast and the season that's before us, just being super inspired by the conversations I'm having with my senior staff team and my leadership team at this moment in time, just the vision and the eagerness. And I hope this is true for all of you. I continue to remain energized doing this job after so many years by the fresh ideas, building on the things we thought were successful. You know that feeling at camp where you think you got it, but then someone says, but we can make it even better. I hope you're all like that. And I'm proud that I have a team that is like that, both in all the teams that I'm involved with in this great profession. So I'm just feeling generally inspired by ideas, flipping staff training schedules on their head, not doing it the same way every year, mixing it up. There's such a place for that. And if there's anything we've learned after the last 3 years, and dare I use the word pivot again, the most overused word of the last 3 years, last time, I promise, Kelly, I think it's been inspiring to see how everyone is willing to change it up and find new things. So that's my inspiration these days. Kelly, why don't you go next, and then we'll leave our guest for the last piece of inspiration.
All right. Well, I was just thinking about our topic today with Jolly and meals and food. And I don't know if you've read any of Michael Pollan's, I want to make sure I pronounce that right. His books, but he wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma and a few other books. But I was thinking back to some of his things that I've read, and I remembered a quote, and I looked it up from Michael Pollan. It says, "The shared meal elevates eating from a mechanical process of fueling the body to a ritual of family and community, from the mere animal biology to an act of culture." So that to me, I was like, oh, that just really defines what Jolly's doing for her camp. And I like that, made me think about today.
I love that. And yeah, and I think this has been such it's, first of all, it's made us all hungry, this conversation, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, meals, you think about some of your best moments with your own family and all that stuff, and often it's derived or surrounded around mealtime. And some of our best memories are around meals and those moments. So camp can definitely, as Jolly has indicated, can be a source for those memories outside of the great special program or evening program or bunk experience. So kudos to the topic today for sure. And Jolly, your thoughts on some inspiration for you these days?
Well, I did the same thing as Kelly. Because of the topic I brought, I thought I'm going to bring two things to you that have inspired me. One recently, and one that had started this, like when I started thinking about this years and years ago. And I'll start with that one. And it's a book, The Good Food Revolution, Growing Healthy Food, People and Communities by Will Allen. He's the CEO of Growing Power. He's actually here in the Midwest, but wrote a great book that I think can kind of help us think about things differently as far as food. And then the other one's just more fun. It's called Le Brigade, or Brigade, I guess, if you're speaking French, but it's the Kitchen Brigade. And it's a French film that I recently watched about a chef and building community in her kitchen with young people. And I think that is our key of our kitchen, right? Is that we have a lot of young people who are working in there, and how can we create the community for them as well? And hers is a little bit different than our experience, but it's a fun film to watch, and I thought I would share that.
That's awesome. What platform would you find the Kitchen Brigade? Do you remember?
Well, I travel a lot. I watched it on Delta.
Oh,
So it happened to be fine. It's on Delta. But I did recently see it, I believe, on Amazon Prime.
okay,
So
great.
double check there. I will tell you the three. I saw it on one of my platforms. The three that I have are Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Apple. So it's on one of those.
Okay, so if our audience has ever heard of those three platforms, look on there. So thank you, Jolly.
Very nice. Very nice. I like it. All right. Before we leave for the day, we always like to make sure that guests can get a hold, or listeners, excuse me, can get a hold of our guests or of Howie and I. So Howie, how should individuals who want to chat with you or connect with you get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. Howie at camprobinhood.ca is my email, and on social channels at Howie Grossinger. So feel free to reach out. Love to connect with camp pros all over the place.
All right. Jolly, what about you?
Yeah, so Jolly at Robindel, ROBINDEL.com. Or some of you may already have Jolly Corley at Gmail. Totally fine. You can do either. And then if you want to follow, like Kelly does, Insta Robindel. So that's our official Insta is Insta Robindel. And then I'm just at Jolly Corley on Instagram. So happy to have you follow along.
All right. Amazing. So please do not forget that you can find all of our show notes, and I'm putting these resources in here at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find everything that we mentioned and also other good things from our shows from the past. We hope you enjoyed this. Jolly, thank you so much. It's always a treat. It's like sitting down with camp friends. We love it. Thanks for taking time out of your day and always bringing it back to culture and community. We love that about you. So thank you so much, Howie. Always a pleasure. And thanks for listening, everyone.